joining us. Welcome and Happy New Year. This is my first live chat for 2024. Super exciting. Welcome. Hey, I am Mary from Mary's Heirloom Seeds, and I try to go live here every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Time here on my YouTube channel. I will have more videos posted that are not live videos, but today is a super exciting video. I am so excited to share this information with you. So for those of you just joining me for the first time, welcome. If you've joined me regularly, welcome back. I always appreciate that you join me, that you ask your questions, that you share your information. And last live video, Krista says, I'm excited too. Hey, Inga. Hey, Krista. And we've got Lynn joining us too. Hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you can. Hey, Lynn, thanks for joining us. So last week, hey, Christine, the C in KNC Worm Farm is joining us as well. So we've got some awesome news to share with you. Hog legs. Hey, Cheryl, thanks for joining us as well. We've got some locals too. Krista, you're not too far from me either. Hey, Shirley. Oh, we've got some great regulars here. Agape Field is here as well. Oh, I am so excited that you're joining me. Last week, I shared, you know what, honestly, I think it was last week. So much has happened since then that I have totally lost track of time. Moonbladen is joining me again as well. So last live chat, I shared about our Plant for Pollinators intro. So before I get started with the meat and potatoes of the videos, I'm going to share with you about Plant for Pollinators month. Every year in January, I share Plant for Pollinators info with all of our subscribers, my friends, customers, followers, everyone. I will talk to a stranger about planting for pollinators, and why I do it in January is a very common question. And that's because most of us are planning our future spring gardens in January. So January is the month that I talk about planting for pollinators because it's very important that we incorporate pollinator-friendly varieties in our garden, not only because pollinators are important to produce healthy crops, but also we need pollinators. It's important. At least 75% of the food that we eat, 1 in 3 bites of food we eat requires pollinators. So super, super important. If you haven't already subscribed to my email list, in the description section of this video, you'll find a link to my sign up. You'll also find my updated planting guide, and there's a lot of information there. Every order during the month of January will include several things. One is the printed information about why pollinators are important. The backside is a couple varieties that I found that were really important. It includes specific seed planting information, whether it needs cold stratification, etc. You'll also receive a free awesome zinnia postcard with some zinnia information in the back, as well as 2 free seed packs, which is right now for January of 2024 is zinnia seeds and yellow pear tomato seeds, 2 of my absolute favorites. So now that we've discussed, I've already shared with you the basics of Plant for Pollinators month in January. Part of my very brief discussion last week on the intro for Plant for Pollinators was soil remediation with flowers. But also I'm going to talk about today is healing your soil, improving your soil using flowers. I was reading a blog post from someone who's like a influencer, social media person. Inga says the postcards are awesome, are beautiful, thank you. So I was reading this article or post from a blogger. She's like an influencer, whatever. She's got her backyard garden. And she said that when she was new to gardening, she was like, I don't need flowers, I'm trying to grow food. But then she backtracked years later and was like, now I realize the importance of flowers in the garden. And that has been something that I have been very interested in for a very long time, is helping people grow a healthy garden, but also working with nature. So that's why I have a companion planting guide that includes specific flowers that will work with your garden. Hey, Jackie Jacks, thanks for joining us. So tonight my discussion is improving your soil with flowers. Number one, I'm going to talk about soil remediation. And I touched on it last week, but I'm going to discuss it a little more in depth now. Sunflowers. Now, someone reached out to me. They were living in Ohio, a very small town. They were affected by a chemical spill, and they wanted to know about soil remediation using sunflowers. So I shared this giant list of information and how it works and why we do it and how it could help on a small scale and also a large scale. And at the time, I donated literally as many sunflower seeds as I could fit into a box for her and her farmers. And I wanted to touch on that tonight and then also kind of expand on it with other varieties. Now, after both Fukushima, I have a giant cat that's going to come join me. Agape Field says, I love sunflowers. Hopefully he doesn't turn over my table because he's gigantic. We've had a little bit of an unrest in the household right now, so I'm trying to keep everybody happy. Anyway, so back on track. Sorry about that. After both Fukushima and Chernobyl nuclear incidents, sunflower fields were planted across the affected areas to, I wouldn't say limit the exposure, but to absorb some of the radiation and harvest some of the contaminants in the soil. Now, how that works is still being tested. And I was reading this amazing bit of literature where this lady was looking at specific strains of sunflowers and the genomes involved in the different types of sunflowers, that ones will maybe soak up more of the heavy metals than others, which I'm fascinated by it. So I will share in a text article on my website. I'll share some of this information because I am fascinated. So basically, I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of it, but essentially these sunflowers are powerhouses. They are able to take in heavy metals in contaminated soil in ways that are completely natural and not harmful to the environment or the surrounding ecosystem. So it's called phytoremediation. Now, Christine has an awesome addition to it as well. And worms are also used to help remove heavy metals from soil, which you're a step ahead of me here, because I will discuss worms very briefly as soon as I'm done with this. But sunflowers are probably the top as far as phytoremediation. No, Christine, you and Kathy are the worm queens. So I will definitely defer to your expertise when it comes to worms. So you have shared so much wealth of knowledge. For those of you that are watching and don't know, KNC Worm Farm is an absolutely fan-freaking-tastic Facebook page, business, small business. They have worm tea, worm castings, a worm farm. They are a wealth of information. So if you haven't checked out their Facebook page, check it out, because they have shared so much helpful information. They gave me info on making your own worm tea, and they also sent me this massive thing of worm tea that was amazing for my garden. So if you want some information on starting a worm farm for your own personal use, or if you want to buy worm tea or worm castings, please, Jackie Jacks, I can't post a link, but Christine, I don't normally allow people to share outside links during my live chat, but I will always make an exception for KNC Worm Farm. So Christine, if you want to share a link to your website, please do so. It would be super helpful for everyone. Okay, now we're talking about sunflowers. We kind of sidetracked into the worms, and I'll leave that to Christine to share all the awesome information. Sunflowers and soil remediation is super important. If you have heavy metals in your soil, if you're not sure if your soil is contaminated, you can use sunflowers to absorb the contaminants from your soil. It is important to reiterate that I mentioned in the last video, and I'm going to share it again. When you use sunflowers as phytoremediation, you do not want to allow the plants to decompose in your garden. You do not want to use them in your compost. You want to remove everything from your soil and throw them in the trash or dispose of them properly. Some people have a burn pile and they don't use their trash. Obviously, your burn pile isn't going to be in your garden, so if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But you should not use your sunflowers as compost or anything else. Krista says, will this include your soil was treated with chemicals? Sometimes, yes. So what I'm reading is, in general, phytoremediation provides a much less invasive way to clean your soil from contaminants, not just heavy metals. It can be radiation. It can be chemicals that you have or someone else has used in your garden. It is a safer option than digging up your soil. It is a more eco-friendly option than digging up your soil. And it is more friendly than other possible treatments for contaminated soil. It's cheaper also. So if you're, depending on what you're looking at, like the different aspects of phytoremediation versus, honestly, if you had contaminated soil, the option is to remove all that soil and get rid of it. It's a big, big problem. And a couple of years ago, there was a massive amount of people that have received contaminated compost or contaminated soil. And so they're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of removing that soil and throwing it away. You can't really reuse that in a vegetable garden. So phytoremediation is a possible way to remove some of those contaminants. It doesn't happen overnight. Sunflowers take an entire season to remove some of those contaminants, and you might want to test your soil first, use the sunflowers for phytoremediation, and then test your soil again. I do have a couple videos for soil testing coming up, not specifically for contamination because I don't have contaminated soil. I'm testing my soil for nutrients and what I might need to add. So there's that'll be kind of an update. It takes a while to have your soil tested, so it's not an overnight thing. Inga says, pick them, enjoy them, throw them in the trash, no composting. With burning, what if you want to use the ashes in your soil? Do not. If you burn your plants, do not use that. I don't know what would happen. So in my opinion, we have a trash service here, and we're fortunate to have a trash service here. But I know there are people in more rural areas than us that do not have trash service. So they burn their trash. If that was my situation and I was having to burn my trash or burn my brush, I would not use that. I don't know what would happen. So I'm only saying that I wouldn't chance it. I would throw it away or remove it to an area that wouldn't be an issue. Will the birds or other natures be harmed if they eat from the sunflowers? It's my understanding that no, it would not. So it's not necessarily, it's more so in the plant than in the seeds, possibly. That's just what I'm seeing from different sources. I will have an update. I'm super excited to be sharing more phytoremediation info with you. So I'm hoping this will spawn into future videos where I'll have a lot more in-depth information. Okay, so we talked about sunflowers. We talked about how they can remove the contaminants from your soil. Now, another option as far as healing your soil is pests. Agape Field said, I had a guy with a tractor that was on our property and had a hydraulic fluid line burst, and spilled into your soil. Going to plant lots of sunflowers in that area for sure. So if you are looking for bulk sunflowers to plant in a larger area, if you go to marysheirloomseeds.com, the link is in the description section of this video, go to our sprouts page and you can find sunflower seeds by the pound. And I will have larger options at a later time. I will have, if you're interested, I might have a couple other ones I'm going to be discussing tonight that you can buy in bulk. And those are also available under sprouting seeds. So stay tuned. I've got a lot of great information tonight to share with you. I hope you are ready to get lots of info. My next one is marigolds. So this is not phytoremediation necessarily. This is specifically for, Inga says, no, I still wouldn't save the seeds. Correct. You don't want to save seeds from a crop that you are using to pull heavy metals. You're absolutely right. One of the more damaging pests in your garden are root knot nematodes. And this was a huge issue that we had in South Florida when we lived there. Agape Field, if you check out our sprouts page, you can buy it by the pound right now. And I will hope to have the 3-pound option at a later time. Probably by the end of the night because I'm still working tonight. I got a really late night at work tonight. So marigolds will help with root knot nematodes. So if you've ever had a crop of, say, tomatoes that just were sickly, if you pull them up and those roots have big nodules on them, oftentimes you have what's called root knot nematodes in your soil. And that's super frustrating. It is a plant parasitic nematode. I specify because there's actually a beneficial nematode and a parasitic nematode. And the root knot nematode is the bad kind. Marigolds are allelopathic. Allelopathic. I'm probably totally screwing that up. Layman's terms, the roots exude a chemical that can kill or deter root knot nematodes. Cool, right? So the marigolds produce a substance called, and again, I might butcher this, and I had to write it down just in case, alpha terthionyl. Hope I got that one right. That is the substance which can aid in the reduction and death of root knot nematodes. Now, we try to work with nature in our gardens, but at the same time, root knot nematodes are so absolutely frustrating. And if you've ever grown this beautiful tomato plant and it's just turned to ugh, yes, they are allelopathic as well. So for people that are growing sunflowers, generally, you want to plant your sunflowers outside of your regular garden. And if you're using the sunflowers for phytoremediation, that's all you're growing. You don't want to grow sunflowers in an area that you might be growing, say, tomatoes or cucumbers, because those roots can exude, they're allelopathic, they can exude a chemical that can hinder their growth. So yes, absolutely, you are correct. And I mentioned that in a previous video, I think in my sunflower video. The substance called alpha terthionyl, sorry, I will type this out in there because I am horrible at pronouncing some of this stuff. It will not only reduce, but it will aid in removing some of the, hey Alan, thanks for joining me. It'll remove some of the bacteria and fungus and root knot nematodes in your soil. Now, there's a couple of long-term studies that they've done, and there wasn't necessarily, hey, becoming a green stalker, thanks for joining me. There wasn't necessarily a benefit of the African crackerjack marigold and the French marigold. If you don't know the difference between the two, French marigolds are typically a smaller bush, and African crackerjack marigolds are a much larger plant. So depending on what type of space you have, you can grow both or you can go one or the other. If you haven't already, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate it. But especially in Florida, I did mention when I lived there and I grew there, root knot nematodes are a big deal. Marigolds are typically a summer crop for most areas of the US, but in Florida, you can grow them almost year round. And they can be grown ahead of time as a cover crop to disperse or deter the nematodes from your garden so that when you plant tomatoes the next time around, you've got a healthy garden or you've got healthier soil. So tonight we're talking about improving your soil health using flowers. So first we mentioned sunflowers and phytoremediation, and now we have marigolds that are going to help you get rid of root knot nematodes, which are an organism that diseases your plant. Essentially, it just sucks the life out of your plant. Now, a couple of other things that you can grow in your garden, and that's alfalfa. That's not necessarily grown as the flower, even though alfalfa is fantastic for bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. Alfalfa, if you grow it, can improve your soil as a green manure. A green manure is simply grown in your garden. You can mow it down or you can till it under to give you good nitrogen-rich soil. You can, like I said, you can also compost it. So there's so many ways you can use alfalfa in your garden to heal your soil. Sometimes what people will do, if you are really trying to heal your soil in an area that you have time to heal, you can grow the sunflowers for your phytoremediation, pull those sunflowers out, and then throw some alfalfa seeds down there and allow that to grow and provide nitrogen for your soil. You can either mow it down or till it under, and now you have much healthier soil than what you started with. We also offer alfalfa as a bulk option under sprouts. So something to think about if you're wanting to add more organic matter to your garden. Alfalfa is fantastic. And I've got a video even that I posted about all the bees and butterflies on my alfalfa. In our front area, I have, Inga, I'm getting to that. I will definitely share about breaking up some red clay. In our front area, we have, I call it our front forest, and it is a wooded area. There are some sunny areas, but it is mostly semi-shady. So I have taken to the scatter method of planting flower seeds. And I have literally I took the zinnia mix, I took the butterfly garden mix, I took the crimson clover, I took lemon queen sunflower and black oil sunflower. And I just took an entire handfuls of it. I put it in a container and I just flung it everywhere. I didn't even, there's no burying it, there's no planting it. I just flung it everywhere in early spring before our last frost. And so that way they had a chance to just be one with nature, and nature took its course. And we had a beautiful front crop of pollinator-friendly flowers and plants, and it was really nice to see so much activity, and that just kind of goes out through the rest of the property. So when we can attract them to our gardens, it makes a big difference. So borage, Inga just asked about breaking up red clay soil, and borage is super important for that. Borage is one of my absolute favorites. I got a video that says my borage brings all the bees to the yard. It's kind of a silly take on one of the silly songs. But it is full of bees every year. But what a lot of people don't realize is borage can break up heavy soils because the roots are very, very strong. So even in the crummiest of soils, borage can thrive. Not guaranteed, but it can thrive. If you are in a hurry to get good green manure into your plants, you can plant them, and then before they flower, you can chop and drop. So that means you're just chopping the plants down, letting them decompose on the top of your soil, and then continuing to go from there. And then that way the nutrients will be releasing a little slower because they're not tilled under the soil or they're not added to your compost. The deep tap roots of the borage, they've got good fibrous stalks. They will help break up your soil. Now, the other thing that will also help you break up your soil is worms. If you have a healthy worm population, you will have a lot of great benefits. So Christine mentioned earlier, Becoming a Green Stalker says, is borage harmful to dogs? If eaten in large quantities, yes, it can be harmful to dogs. There's a lot of things in your garden that might be harmful to dogs, like mulch isn't good for your dogs, and there's amaranth isn't necessarily good for your dogs. So yes, there's plenty of things in your garden that may or may not be good for dogs. But honestly, I generally prefer that dogs aren't eating my garden. So there's, if you can keep them out of the garden, that would be helpful. So back to worms. Not only can worms be helpful in your garden, they can be helpful in your compost. So if you do have an issue with heavy metals, with contaminated soil, with heavy clay soil, or just not so healthy soil, worms are your friend. You can add worm tea or worm casings to your garden soil to help kind of bring it back to life, but adding actual worms or encouraging worms into your garden soil or your compost is also super helpful. And that's why I defer to Christine, because she knows a whole lot more about worms than anything else. Becoming a Green Stalker says, they will likely just eat my beans and tomatoes. Hey Tilly, thanks for joining us. So borage can also be planted as a cover crop. In late soil, it will provide green materials in the form of nitrogen to your soil. As I mentioned earlier, you can chop and drop. So that's just chopping it down, letting it decompose. You can till it under your soil, or you can pull it up and you can add it to your compost pile or your compost bin, whatever you're working with. And that will add a really simple green manure. The benefit of borage, it also reseeds or self-seeds very easily. So why someone would complain about free plants, I have no idea. But someone once told me that borage was invasive. Oh my gosh. It's not invasive. Borage will self-seed freely, which means you get free plants. If you've got chickens, feed the sprouts you don't want to your chickens. If you like eating greens, eat it. Every single one of those tiny little borage sprouts is edible, which means it's not just free seeds, it's free food, it's free nitrogen from your garden. Why complain about something that's free food, right? So another benefit of borage is you can use it as a manure tea. If you go back, way back into some of my old YouTube videos, I took a 5-gallon regular white bucket, and I also took a 5-gallon one of the recycled kitty litter buckets, and I shoved a bunch of borage into a bucket. I added water to it and I put a top on it because I don't want any animals falling in and dying in my borage tea. And you let that stuff sit for 2 weeks. It is disgusting. It stinks. It does not smell as good as K&C Worm Farm's worm tea, but it's fermenting. So borage can be used as a fermented fertilizer tea. All I can say is when you open that lid, stand back. So what you do is you take a bucket, you fill that thing up with borage leaves, you top it up with water to the top, and you let it sit for 2 weeks. You can stir it within the 2 weeks. And then after you're ready, you can use it weekly. It really is stinky. And then you can dilute your borage tea. 1 part borage tea, 10 parts water. So that's a pretty good mix. If you've got a big barrel, definitely use it put your borage in there, put your water in there, and you're good to go. So those are the easy ones, right? Now there's a couple other varieties that I'll mention. Oh yes, Christine, you are correct. Fish emulsion tea is way more disgusting than borage tea. You are right. It's gross. Buckwheat. We also sell buckwheat seeds under sprouting seeds. You can grow them as a microgreen or you can grow them as a cover crop. Microgreens can be also used as a green manure crop, same way as I mentioned about borage. It can also be used added to compost. So sometimes people are just going to grow a small amount of buckwheat, and sometimes you're going to grow a massive amount of buckwheat. You can buy it by the pound, and if you want a larger quantity of any of the sprouting seeds I carry, send me an email. I can always work with people. My email address is mary@marysheirloomseeds.com. I do answer my own emails, and usually within 48 hours, life gets a little crazy here, so please have patience with me, and I'll get to you. And if you want something in a larger quantity, I can try and work it out with you. Hog legs, she asked me about kamut wheat, which is, we sell Corazon wheat. It's an original non-hybridized heirloom wheat from centuries ago. She asked about it. I have it, and now we offer it at Mary's Heirloom Seeds. So buckwheat can be used as a green manure. You can add it to your compost. It can also improve the moisture capability of becoming a green stalker. Says she's really fast. Don't let her kid you. I tried. It can improve sandy soils. And Inga, remember you asked me, buckwheat can also loosen clay soils. So again, it's another one of those varieties that you can just scatter it. You don't have to plant every little seed. You scatter it, you let it grow, you let it nurture your soil, you chop it down, and now you plant in that area. And you've got healthier soil than when you got started. It brings up phosphorus from the soil, similar to what peas do, so that when you chop and drop, it can add phosphorus to your soil as well. Super awesome, right? Beans are another one, but I'll talk about that at a later time. Beans actually soak up the nitrogen from the air and bring it down into your soil. So then when you chop and drop those beans, you're adding nitrogen to your soil. It's not going to add nitrogen immediately to your soil. It's going to add it for future crops. So it takes some planning. Anytime you want to improve your soil the natural way, you always want to do something that's going to take a little time. And the time is worth it. I'll tell you, the time is worth it. If you put in the time, if you want it to work, it's worth it. Inga says, also have wet, soggy area. Is there anything for those? Okay, off the top of my head, buckwheat is definitely one of them, and I think comfrey is one of them. And just give me a little time. Off the top of my head, I don't remember all of them, but I do have a list. Saltwort is another one that's good for boggier soils. Now here's one that you might not have thought about. We're talking about today improving your soil health using flowers. And one of the answers to that is chamomile. And you might be thinking, well, that's a little odd, but who knows, right? Chamomile is a healing herb for humans. We use it as a mild calmative. It helps some people sleep. If you have certain allergies to certain flowers, you might want to look into whether chamomile is good for you or not good for you. But it improves the health of plants nearby, and it can be made into a tea to help healing plants. So not only can it heal us, but it can also heal our plants in our garden. So it can also be chopped and dropped as well into your soil. Kind of a different option, not necessarily one that you would have thought about. And last but certainly not least, now please keep in mind, these aren't all of the varieties of flowers that will help improve your garden. I only have so much time to talk about all the different amazing stuff to improve your soil. But since this is Plant for Pollinators Month, I wanted to specifically share flowers and varieties that produce flowers that will benefit your soil, but also benefit your garden as well. If you haven't already, please sign up for my email list. The link is in the description below. Hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So last but certainly not least is comfrey. Now, comfrey can be, it can spread in your garden where you may not want it. So a lot of people recommend planting comfrey in a container or in an area where you don't necessarily want it to be spreading. Krista says, so this is part one. It very well could be part one. Comfrey concentrates nitrogen, silica, magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium. So all of these awesomeness concentrated in one plant where you can, just like borage, you can chop and drop, which means you're chopping it down and allowing it to decompose. You can chop it and throw it in your compost pile, but you can also make a tea from it and use it to feed your plants. It will also break up hard soils. So Inga, you mentioned about clay soils. Comfrey is another option. I will warn you on comfrey. Comfrey requires cold stratification. So it's not necessarily a variety that you can grab your seeds, plant it outside, and just expect it just to pop up at any time. That's calendula. This is beautiful, and it's so absolutely fantastic and easy to grow. You plant your seeds, and they produce these massive things. Zinnia also super easy to grow, and it pops up wherever you want it to go. Comfrey requires a lot more attention. And yes, Christine, you are correct. It also helps reduce powdery mildew. You're ahead of me there. I have a list of the things that comfrey does just to share with you today. I had to write a list because it's been an absolute crazy week this week again. It's always a crazy week when it comes to January and everybody wants their seeds like yesterday. So not only can you use it as micro and macronutrients, it can break up hard soil. So Inga, you mentioned about clay soil. The leaves are a fantastic compost activator. So instead of chopping it and leaving it down to decompose in your soil, you can take those and put them in your compost bin to help speed up the compost activity in your compost pile or your compost bin. Super, super important for people that are looking for a faster, there's other things you can do for your compost pile to speed it up, but that's a good one. Christine, totally fine that you're ahead of me. It won't draw nitrogen from your soil like some of the other varieties will. So it doesn't necessarily take so much from your soil as it does put into your soil as far as compost goes. So comfrey can be used as a compost activator, and I mentioned it can be used as a tea. So the same exact way I mentioned that you can use borage as a tea, you can use comfrey. So you chop those leaves, you put them in a bucket, and you let them sit for 2 weeks. The best way to do it, it's very similar to making your worm tea that Christine has talked about. You can aerate it. Some people use an aerating like a stone, like an air pump, or you can just simply, I wouldn't use your hand because it does stink by the time you're done. Just take a stick, take something and stir that bucket of water with your comfrey just to kind of activate your tea. And then you can use it not only as a feed, but also as a pest repellent and, as Christine said, for powdery mildew. So especially if you're in areas like Florida, Texas, where it gets very humid and you have issues with powdery mildew, definitely try your hand at comfrey. Now, if you're looking at my website and you're going, Mary, you're out of comfrey, why are you talking about this? Please stay tuned because I will be updating my online stock tonight. I did mention that I have a long night ahead of me because I've got a lot of work to do. It's Thursday. Friday, we've got a long day in the seed shop as well. So just bear with me here. Everything I've discussed tonight is on my website. You can use the search option. If you don't see it right away, use the search option. If you still can't find it, you can always send me an email. My email is mary@marysheirloomseeds.com, and I do try to answer as quickly as possible, but sometimes it takes me a little while because I'm human. Imagine that, right? All right, everybody, that is it for my, I guess, as Krista said, maybe my part one. But today we talked about improving your soil health using flowers. We did that because it is Plant for Pollinators Month at Mary's Heirloom Seeds. I encourage you to sign up for my emails. In the description section of this video is a link to my email sign up as well as my comprehensive planting guide. And I highly recommend you check it out. Inga says, thank you, Mary. I was planning on planting comfrey and use the roots as medicinal. Awesome. Now it can go everywhere. Thank you so much, everybody. I really do appreciate that you come and join me every Thursday. I will try to be more consistent in 2024. And also I'll have some videos that aren't live coming up specifically for soil collection and soil testing as soon as things get a little smoother here on our homestead. I am Mary at Mary's Heirloom Seeds signing off, and I hope you enjoyed my video. If you have questions, you can send me an email to mary@marysheirloomseeds.com. Thanks for joining me and happy planting.